Perfect timing. All right. So cool. Um, welcome to Talking Tech Tuesdays. I'm your host, Chance Mack. And today we're talking about a couple different things related to tech and investing. Um, this video is going to be specifically for those looking to build generational wealth, those who are interested in investing, long term investing, um, more specifically, those who are looking to invest for their children, set their children up so that they have some type of generational wealth. And it's very important for us to start thinking about our kids' future right now, right? So, give me a second. I'm gonna just pull up my notes really quickly, and then we're gonna get into this, right? Right. So, welcome into Talking Tech Tuesdays. I'm your host, Chance Mack, and today we're talking about three things: tech, culture, and people. So, I'm not gonna be long-winded tonight. I just really want to stress a few things that I feel like are important to our community, and it's important that we have these conversations and we have this dialogue, right? Let me make sure this is. Hold on one second. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Talking Tech Tuesdays. I'm your host, Chance Mack, and today we're talking about three things: tech, culture, and people. Now, I'm not going to be extremely long winded tonight, but I do want to stress the importance of a few things that um, might be relevant to our community, right? So, when we think about investing and trading stocks, it's important that we just back up and understand why we're even doing this, right? So, the whole purpose of investing in the stock market is to build generational wealth, right? It's not to, you know, get rich quick. It's not to, um, you know, do it because it's cool. Like, I know that tech and stocks are trending right now, but I would just encourage everyone that's listening to this video to think a little bit deeper about why we're doing this, right? And it's really two ways to build generational wealth within this company. Or, well, let me say three ways. So it's one, owning a business, right? Owning a small business within AmeriCorps or a large enterprise, if you could make it to that point. The second thing is to invest in real estate, right? And then the third vessel or vehicle for building generational wealth is around investing, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today around the stock market. What up, boy? Saying what's up. Um, so yeah, that's what we're talking about today: investing in the stock market. And for those who have children, man, this episode is extremely important. So, like I said, I'm just trying to set the foundation for what our intentions are for this live, and then we're going to dive right into the actual content, right? So I have 5 topics to talk about. I'm not going to be long-winded, just because I know this is a microwave culture, right? But this information is real food, right? Like, this is Ruth Chris, like what I'm gonna give y'all, and I really believe that if you just listen, all you gotta do is just listen, right? If you just listen and just take some of the advice that I'm giving you, your kids and your family will thank you for it. You know, I'll just tell a personal story while I'm on it, right? Like, you know, um, so my grandfather um, was a multimillionaire, right? I didn't know this because I didn't have a real relationship with my grandfather until he passed, like until after he passed, right? And one of the things that he did in the 50s and 60s, my grandfather, just to get some background, my grandfather, his name was Jimmy Mack from New York, um, really from South Carolina, but moved to New York to start his enterprise, right? And one of the things that he did with the fourth grade education was he opened a gas station in Queens, right? and multimillionaire, like literally could do math like off the top of his head. His one of his good friends ran a tax company in the 70s and actually was sued by the IRS, but actually beat them. Just true legendary stuff like within my family. And all of this information wasn't passed down to me as a kid until now, right? I'm 29 years old and I'm just now learning about all of the great things that my grandfather did, right? And the reason that is because of the relationship that a lot of black fathers have with their children in our community. But I feel like our generation is changing that, right? So with that being said, it's important for me, as a father, as a leader in this community, to number one, recognize the black men that are great fathers, and the strong women, black women that have been holding it down for you know decades, right? Um, but I also want to give some food to our community, right, and give some knowledge to our community that can, you know, help build generational wealth. So let me close the story about my grandfather. So, my grandfather, went through some troubles, financial troubles, like at the later on in his life, and when it was time to bury him, it was time. It was a challenge for the family to get the money to give him proper burial, right? And luckily he was being able to be sent off properly. But when we think about assets and passing down generational wealth, some of the things that I talk about tonight might interest you and help you, you know, not have to worry about that, right? We know that death is inevitable, but like, what are we doing to prepare ourselves to that, right? For that, right? Like, do we have life insurance? Do we have assets to pass our children outside of just memories, right? So let's get into it. So, thank you all for tuning in. Again, we live on YouTube, we live on Instagram, and this video will be chopped up and spread throughout the week, right? So the stock market took a plunge yesterday, and one of the big companies I want to talk about is a tech company that I'm very familiar with. So SAP, right? Now, a lot of y'all might not know about SAP, but they're a huge ERP giant, right? And they've been dominating the market in the enterprise resource planning space for decades, right? And so when we talk about ERP, let me break that down because I know that that's not common knowledge, as they say. ERP systems are what businesses use to run their business, right? Like enterprise level businesses, they use these systems, whether it be HR systems like HCM. I talked about, working at Workday a few years ago. So that's an HCM ERP, right? You have your financials, which runs your books, your accounting, your reporting. That's another form of an ERP, right? Your CRM is an ERP, right? So your customer relationship management system. And this also could be very important information for small business owners as they look to, develop an enterprise system, right? So they have these three different pillars that run the business. So your finance system, your HR system, and then your CRM. And in tech, we always talk about this phrase of people, product, process, right? And those, if you think about that and you focus on those areas and you do those areas well, then you'll be successful in business, right? So when we think about ERP, SAP, but SAP is the company. It's a German-based company, right? But huge tech player. They have huge offices in San Francisco. When I go to San Francisco, like, and you're driving from like San Jose or just all up and down the PCH, you'll see like SAP offices everywhere, big sprawling offices, right? But they're huge in Europe, right? So when we think about ERP systems, they've been notorious for having really large contracts, right? Really multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts. And how they get these contracts is, we'll give our software away up front, and then on the back end, when it's time to renew, we'll just, that's when we'll get them, right? We've already set our hooks in with the technology. Now they need a system. Change into another system is so difficult that it's just really hard to do. So about 10 years ago, well, maybe more than that, about 15 years ago, Salesforce was introduced into the market, and it truly revolutionized just the cloud, right? So we talked about Oracle and their acquisition of TikTok on Talking Tech Tuesdays a few weeks ago. Um, Now, when so Oracle had a guy named Mark Benioff who left Oracle and started Salesforce, right? Tech billionaire now, right? Like these are the things that they do, right? They started one company, leave a company, start another company, become billionaires. So he left Oracle, started Salesforce, and that created this whole new idea or reimagined what we could do with the cloud, right? It really birthed the cloud and really birthed the cloud wars that came after that, right? So with that being said, as it relates to SAP has had legacy business, right? All of these, multi-million dollar contracts that I talked about just a minute ago. Um, so companies like Workday, Oracle, SAP, um, Salesforce all started just competing for just market share within the cloud space. And what we've seen is some start to just really just be segmented. Now, SAP, Oracle, and Workday compete against each other. Um, there's some nuance to their technology. Also, there's some um, it's all about who you want to be in business with from a culture perspective. Workday has been recognized as the leader in HCM space. Oracle for finance. Infor is in there as well. Um, so yeah, so Cloud Wars took place. SAP. The reason I'm even mentioning this, they took a 23% nosedive yesterday, losing I think 39 billion, if I'm not mistaken, in asset value, just from their stock taking that big of a hit. Now, what we're seeing or what we're hearing, just from the research that I've done, is this could be a microcosm of what's taking place in the technology sector. Now, 2020 is the year of creativity. I keep saying that. Like, if you're not creating right now, if you're not starting a business, if you're not developing some type of intellectual property, I'm telling y'all gotta get on to that. Like, this is the year of creativity, and if you just create in this moment, 10 years from now, you'll be grateful, right? And also from an investing standpoint, people have been waiting on 2020 for years, right? Like, this is the time when people become millionaires, become rich, because when there's fear and there's like turmoil within our society, there's opportunity, right? People always say, "Oh, don't time the market. Wait until there's blood on the streets." Now, and blood on the streets is an acronym for like a recession, or people just being not having the money to necessarily purchase things. Yeah. The time is now. So blood in the streets is the idea that you don't have the money to acquire assets or acquire the things that most consumers want. So you things are on a discount, but then also there's a huge opportunity for people to acquire things, right? People who have it to acquire. So with that being said, Ronald, you're right. Time is now, right? 2020, like when March happened, people got rich, right? And they're still getting rich. The stock market is at all-time highs, even though yesterday SAP took a nosedive, right? 23%, $39 billion lost in 8 hours, like that, right? But there's some macro issues or macro challenges that SAP has. Number one, it's in a very competitive space. And then just the cloud wars, and just businesses don't necessarily have the massive budgets or the ability to transition like they did in years prior. So with that being said, now is also a good time to buy if you're ever interested, and in these type of ERP stocks. I would encourage you all to look at what's on the market in terms of ERP. Um, uh, don't just buy SAP because they just went down yesterday. Like, you need to understand, look at their earnings, look at their financial statement, and understand what's going on in their business. Learn about their technology before you invest in them. I would also encourage you all to think, like I said, think long term, right? Like, let's not be, by the minute investors or traders, but think about how we can truly build generational wealth. And the way that we can do that is by investing long term. We always talk about Warren Buffett on Talking Tech Tuesdays. Like, he is our guiding light. Like if we could model our portfolio after anybody, it's Warren Buffett. His thing is all about compound interest, buy and hold, right? So me as an investor, I'm not on his level. I definitely don't have, the amount of money that he has or had when he first started. Or maybe I do, but because I don't know what he first started with. But the strategy is buy and hold, right? Like we buy something, we hold it for at least 10 years. That's the strategy that I preach, right? Because trying to trade the market and trying to um, uh, game the system is challenging, especially in the age of 2020. It's the age of information and it's the age of intelligence too, right? Like information and intelligence, right? Because you're competing against bots, you're competing against like people who actually study the market. Like this is their full-time job, is just analyzing candles and you know over analyzing the market, and that's not necessarily what we are. What some of us should be focused on. We should be focused on uh, building generational wealth for our families, and the way that we can do that is investing every month, right? 250 every month, 1,000 every month if you got it. Like that's the way we do it, right? So I wanted to touch on SAP because that was one of the biggest notable current events that took place in the stock market. Um, so last week I posted about my son's birthday being on October 20th, right? Some of y'all might know him as, you know, Chancellor Mack Jr., CJ, the Second Chance. He's gotten a lot of nicknames. And I want to introduce him to y'all here because he's got an amazing personality, but, we're trying to make sure he get on here and just because I honestly believe that he's gonna, like, whenever he does step onto social media, he's gonna really blow some people away. Like how Derek Grace has his children in his videos, and they're like super intelligent. They can, very knowledgeable, very culturally aware. I feel like CJ has a lot of those same traits and very intuitive too. So we're gonna introduce him here, and we're gonna have him doing some content like talking about assets, intellectual property. If you follow me on Instagram and you look at my stories, you'll actually see him on there talking about intellectual property from time to time. And he's literally like a sponge, right? And we're trying to breed his mind to think about revenue generating activities, right? Like if you're gonna be on the tablet, let's play a game that makes you money or something like that, or that teaches you about math, right? That's something that's foundational to life and of value, right? And not only just drilling him on math, but also culture, right? Because I feel like you know as parents, it's important for us to bring balance, right? Like let's not just focus on education, but let's give them some social experience too, so that they can move in the world with charisma, but then also with the word that's on my mind is diligence, but it's not that, with substance, right? So they move in the world with substance, right? So the reason I bring him up is because last week it was his birthday. We went to yeah, lead him through my actions. Absolutely, be a good example. Last week we went to Disney World and we talked about just going there and the experience that it was. But today I made an investment to buy CJ 10 shares of Disney. It cost me a little over $1,000. Now, personally, I always invest $1,000 into my son. It's 5/29 on his birthday. However, this year I wanted to give him something, a true asset, something outside of just the cash, and give him ownership in Disney, something that he can pass down or use however he wants to. And this also just concretes the memory of his third birthday, right? Like memories may fade. He might not remember what he did when he was 3 years old. I know I don't remember like what I was doing at 3 years old. But one thing I could say is, if I hold this, or when I hold this until he's 18, he's going to be able to say, hey, my dad gave me, 10 shares of Disney to start off and go to college or do whatever with it. In addition to my 529, my dad's been saving for me, since I was born, right? So invest for your kids, man. Like, even if you don't have to do a lump sum, you don't have to do it, every year for their birthday or stuff like that. But I do encourage you all to start thinking about how can I invest in my child's future, and not just their education, but like how can I acquire assets to pass along to them today, right? Like it don't have to be a home, It doesn't have to be something extravagant. Just you could buy them, 10 shares of, or 5 shares, or 1 share of Snapchat or Facebook, or something that you just have a vision is going to grow over time. I would encourage you all to invest in tech. Um, Disney's not the traditional tech company. However, if you look at their leadership, you look at their earnings, their focus right now is all tech, right? Disney Plus, and expanding that. Um, and then when I went to the park, I could see how the tech was being utilized in the park, and I believe that that's going to accelerate. As the market comes back as well, like you're going to be able to think about VR and artificial intelligence and what Disney can really do, right? Like they own a lot of content, a lot of titles, and now they have their own platform. They have their own Netflix, right? That's a no brainer, right? So invest for your kids. If you need to understand some stocks to think about, some technology stocks to think about for your children, like shoot me a DM. I have no problem sharing, what I'm investing in. So yeah, that's that on that. Speaking of Disney, we want to talk about Kanye West on Joe Rogan's podcast. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, go listen to it. It took me like a day to listen to, because I it's very challenging for me to listen to podcasts in like unison, like sit down and just really tune in for 3 hours on one thing. Like that's not how my brain operates. So I like listen to it throughout the day in like chunks. But Kanye compared himself to Walt Disney, right? From a creative perspective. Um, and when we think about what Kanye has been able to do and how he's been able to reinvent himself, and reinvent his brand and grow businesses, you could say that he is somewhat along the lines of a Walt Disney in terms of his imagination and creativity, but then also uh, using his imagination and creativity to create true value, true business value, which results in finance, right? So he's a billionaire, and supposedly his net worth is at 5 billion. So the reason I even put this on my notes is because, as parents, we like, I know my parents always used to tell me like, hey, like, you know, you need to start thinking about, and when I got to that age, got of age, right? Started thinking about, hey man, like start thinking about what you want to do and what you want to be in life, right? And my whole goal was like to be in the NFL, be in the NBA, right? Or rap, right? Or produce music. Like those are my goals. Like I ain't have no other focus. But one of the things that my mom did really well was she encouraged me to see the world, even though we weren't taking extravagant trips overseas and things of that nature. She just exposed me to different groups of people, leadership programs. Actually, I'm starting a leadership program, starting a course for exposure and leadership development for young people. It's going to be called Take Chances Academy, but not only for young people, but also for professionals, right? Because we want to be lifelong learners. And I'm learning, at this moment. So the things that I learn, I want to pass down. But yeah, Kanye West, Disney. The real nugget of that is go listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. Really insightful. Talk about presidents. It talks about his presidential run. It talks about technology, where he sees the future going. Some of his relationships. He talks about Jack Dorsey, who's the CEO of Twitter and also the CEO of Square, which actually leads me to my next point. How ironic, right? So somebody asked me the other day, what was the best trade you ever made, right? And again, I'm not a trader. I'm a long-term investor. There's some stats about, if you bought Apple at this time, you would be a millionaire. Let me actually look that up. Give me 1 second real quick. If you bought, and you can Google this yourself, right? If you bought Apple in 2000, what would be the worth of it right now, right? So it says if the headline is if you invested $100 in Apple, in Apple's IPO, how much is that today? Now we know we don't typically invest in IPOs. I try to encourage people to stay away from that because they are volatile, and technology. Everybody not gonna be an Apple, right? Like that's you playing a very you're pretty much gambling. Like you were making a serious bet on a company if you're investing in the IPO. Let me get to a more an article that's more succinct with what I want to say. If you invested $1,000 in Apple 10 years ago, what would it be today? And this article, okay. So if you invested $1,000 in Apple 10 years ago, it would be $6,228, right? Um, and that's as of October 31st. Oh, this is kind of old, 2017, right? Um, you know, it will be a lot more than that today because Apple actually just hit an all-time high and the stock split, um, which I was a benefactor of. Um, so yeah, the key is investing in the market is better than letting that money stack up in your savings account. You're making 0.0001% letting it sit in your savings. So invest that money in an asset, right? I think it's a two-part strategy. Again, like real estate and stocks. You want to have doors, and you also want to have your investment in stocks. Um, the stocks will have that exponential growth, right? Like that compound interest if you hold over years. The real estate is a more stable asset, right? Like if you think over a 30-year um, life cycle of a mortgage, you're going to continue to grow. You might grow 2 to 3% every year, but again, compound interest 2 to 3% every year. You never know what that could look like down the line, right? So invest your money into assets, right? Don't let it sit in your savings account. That's just a gem for those who are sitting on cash, right? There is some benefit to sitting on cash because then you could buy and acquire things when it's time. Um, However, just be smart with your money. Don't put, I wouldn't say spend all your money into the stock market. That is not what I'm saying. However, I'm saying allow yourself to dive into the stock market where it makes sense, or spend a little bit of your savings in the stock market where it makes sense. Um, it's a safe vehicle for your money. And typically, the stock market grows 7% year over year. That's been the average since I think the 50s or 60s. Tech stocks grow at a much higher average than that. Like I think last year Facebook had a 34% growth year over year. So there's definitely some opportunity to make your money work for you, right? While you're sleeping, and you're betting on good leadership, right? You're betting on good products. Like we use Facebook. If we're on Instagram, we're using Facebook, right? Um, so invest that money, right? So back to the best trade I ever made. We talked about Jack Dorsey. He's the CEO of Twitter, but he's also the CEO of Square. The best investment I ever made was in Square, right? I went to San Francisco maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I kept seeing them little Square things, right? Like I kept seeing them, and this was like when they just had the little swipe on your phone, right? I was like, yo, like number one, I didn't know what it was because I didn't have like a cash business, right? Like I didn't have a transactional business where I was taking money in person. Like every business I've ever ran has been primarily online. So I didn't know what that was, right? And this was kind of before it was actually popular. Like where I went to get coffee, if I bought, a pizza, you know, if I went and got a hat from somewhere, I shopped at a little boutique at, downtown San Francisco and got like some clothes for my trip. And they used the Square Reader. And I was like, yo, like, what is that? Like, tell me what that is, right? And the business owner told me what that was. And it was Square, happened to be the Square card reader. So I put, at the time, the stock was like maybe 40 something dollars. Now, if you look at the stock today, when I was preparing for our conversation, it was at $170. And I think it's going to continue to grow up. So, or go up. That was the best trade I've ever made. Square was the best investment because it started as, um, a transactional system, but literally it's functioning as a bank today, right? Like if you think about Cash App, and the Square Readers, the ability to take payments, You make money off those payments. You make 2% off every transaction. You know, like, bro, that's money, right? Like, millions of transactions on those Square readers. I know Intuit had one at one point. I'm not sure if they really continue to invest and develop that technology. Um, so don't. I'm not going to speak bad about them because I just don't know. I'm ignorant to their, strategy on that. But I don't really see too many true competitors of Square right now. So um, that's a really good stock to invest in. Now the banking stocks are interesting, right? Because J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they're all trading about at a 1x um, price point to the amount of assets that they have, right? So you look at J.P. Morgan Chase, I think it's like at 100 or something dollars, but that's pretty cheap compared to what they can do, right? Like they have credit cards, they have like, and all that stuff can be written down in their books. So banking stocks are not necessarily a bad investment right now. I do think that banking is changing, right? They a lot of these banks have a huge retail footprint, which is weighing down their balance sheet, right? But if you think about the last time you actually stopped at the ATM and like got cash, you typically only get cash for like if you need it for something, right? Like if you're going to do something. Back in the day, people used to, your grandma, your granddad used to always keep, some cash on them, right? And it's a good practice to have cash, but like, it's not the same as it was back in the day. Um, so when we think about where the future is headed, it's headed to a more paperless system, right? Um, so think about that. Like as you invest in these banks, think about how you can invest in banks that are, cutting edge in fintech and cutting edge on, paperless payments, right? Square made a huge investment in cryptocurrency, right? They're just thinking about the future in a way that's relevant to me as a long-term investor. And I get it. Like Jack Dorsey is not God. Everything that he invests in or every idea that he has is not going to pan out. But hey, what he has worked on, um, a lot of the projects that he has worked on have been extremely successful. And as a human, I identify with him and his whole methodology on leadership, how he take care of himself and his employees. That's important to me, right? Yeah, that's the best trade I've ever made was in Square. And now I'll open it up for Q&A. I only got a couple people on YouTube and a couple people on Instagram. But if y'all have any questions, shoot them at me. I'll stay on for another few minutes, maybe 3 minutes or so, and then I'll head off. So if you have any questions, type them in the chat on YouTube, and if you're on Instagram, type them in the chat. I'll answer them. So yeah. Thank y'all for tuning in. Let me just say that too. I want to say thank y'all to the viewers that are tuned in on YouTube. Thank y'all for the viewers that's tuned in on Instagram. I really appreciate y'all. Y'all literally watching me build this from the ground up. I'll kind of give y'all some background on what I'm trying to do with this, right? So my goal is to build the Take Chances platform, Take Chances podcast, Take Chances Academy up to a place where I can step away from corporate America. That's number one goal, or one of my goals. But also, I want to develop content in relation to being on radio, TV, and then having my own platform where I can just speak directly to my consumers in relation to investing advice, leadership advice, activism, you know, just community development, all those good things, right? Investing. And so, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. And that's only for the people that are watching this video. I'm not going to share that publicly, but that's literally my, my strategic plan. You're going to see me continue to invest in myself, right? Like, y'all are going to see the quality change. You're going to see, just the transitions on my videos are going to be dope. Like, I'm really about to make sure that I, put the work in so that this can be, of value to my community, right? So I appreciate y'all support. So cool. So yeah, I just got a question from Ronald. SAP market cap drop. Could it be an internal move to buy back outstanding shares because of its 2025 or 2025 2030 potential? Um, it could, but I think what really drove the drop from what I saw um, was they missed their earnings, right? Like, and they missed their earnings because of the cloud wars I talked about, right? Like, they've been able to bank on these huge contracts and like finessing their customers, like, you know, hey, you do this, then I got you. Like, you got your customers in a business headlock, but I wouldn't even say that because a lot of their customers like them, right? But their deals are structured in a way that's long term, right? And their technology structured in a way that's long term. So with that being said, when there is not an ability to um, make a strategic investment long term, they're trying to pivot into more of a you know pay as you go, pay to play type of structure versus like what they've been doing, which is like, hey, we gonna charge y'all $70 million for your manufacturing ERP, and when it's time to upgrade, you know maybe we'll give you a discount and we'll do 60 million. Now the hook is, do you really want to go through and customize all of this ERP software again with the new vendor, or do you want to just stay with who has been doing a good job for you? A lot of companies feel like it's risky to go with a new vendor. It's time consuming. It's like I said, risky. The chances of that being successful is just slim. So they could be dropping the shares to buy it back. If you look at the candles, you could see that there's some institutional investment, because like I said, the candles, like on those institutional investments, they look longer than the transactional investment that me and you would make as individual contributors to the market. So there's definitely some institutional things going on. I'm just not privy to that information. I don't know, but um, I mean, they always have potential, bro. Like, they always have huge potential. So the fact that they're selling off is it's a cause for concern for the industry as a whole, because tech is really hot right now. Like I said earlier, it's all time highs in tech companies. Um, so I imagine that there is going to be some drawback. They're saying that there could be a 7 to 8% correction within the next few weeks because of the election and just post election and what that could look like. But again, we don't trade for the daily news, right? We trade in the long term. We build in generational wealth, and when they're like corrections are taking place, that's their time to invest, right? Like, even if you don't have 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 and drop down, just say, hey man, I got $100, I got $50, I got lunch, I got $10 to put on a company that might be worth that type of investment, right? So Chanel on YouTube just asked me, are there any recommendations on trading apps on how to get your feet wet in trading? Um, yeah. So personally, I think I use Fidelity. It's just a really intuitive platform for me. They do have a mobile app um, that I like to use. Being able to use Face ID is huge. They also, I think for beginners, that's literally the platform I started on was Fidelity. There's platforms like Robinhood, um, but Robinhood has also been hacked. I would recommend that you just kind of stay away from newcomers. Go with the pillars in the industry. So E-Trade is another good one. They've always been online, so they cater to a more digital consumer. E-Trade, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade. I use Fidelity. E-Trade and TD Ameritrade are not bad options for you. What you really want to look for, Chanel, is you know companies that are not going to charge you a commission fee on investing, right? Um, Also, Chanel, like if you're really a beginner, I would say don't invest in a lot of different stocks. Like, buy good companies, and like I said, long term invest, because you'll be able to have the more a better proof point that this is actually working, right? Like you don't want to just put a lot of money into the market and understand that, or lose your money, and you just like, yo, like, chance you just led me astray, and this is actually not beneficial to me at all, right? So invest, like if you have $100 or $120 or so, invest in Apple, right? Like Apple's a good stock. Just get a share and just see what it does over the next 6 months to a year, right? That's a good stock to own, and it's just good to have in your portfolio, right? So again, the apps that I would recommend you check out, um, Fidelity, E Trade, and then TD Ameritrade. Those are three good platforms to start your investing journey, right? And Chanel, you can DM me. Like I'll help you think of things to look for. And again, buy quality stocks. Buy one or two good companies that fit your budget for right now. Give them 6 months. You don't have to invest like now is a volatile time, right? Like I talked about, um, it being like stocks being at an all time high. Um, I do think that there's going to be some correction at some point, but at the same time, there's opportunity there. So, Apple is pretty stable. Facebook is a pretty stable company. Facebook's kind of expensive right now. Um, and yeah, so I think that might be a good place for you to start. Right? And yeah, you're welcome. No problem. Feel free to hit me up online, and if you need some more help or some advice. Right? Hey, Janae. So yeah, with that being said, man, we are 40 minutes in. I've talked enough. Um, if y'all have any further questions, y'all can always go back and review this live. But then also, I'm gonna chop this content up so that you all can see this, on my feed long term. Thank y'all for tuning in again. I'll talk to y'all soon. Take chances. Peace.